The 4-year-old child screamed, "No!" and tore the sacred Luna crown from his father's hands before it could touch Seraphine's silver hair. The entire Ironwood pack watched in frozen horror as little Kalen Valecross, son of the most feared alpha in 3 territories, clutched the golden crown, blessed by the moon goddess herself, forged in ancient fires, worn by Lunas for 8 generations, and ran. Not toward safety. Not toward family. Toward the marble steps where a wolfless Omega scrubbed grease and grime from stone. Alpha Thorian's hand hung suspended mid-ceremony, reaching for a crown that was no longer there. The crown had never chosen its own Luna. Not in 800 years of Ironwood history. Not once. But Kalen wasn't finished. The child pushed through gasping warriors, stumbled past horrified elders, and stopped at the trembling feet of Lunara Myles. A nobody, a wolfless cleaner, a girl the pack had learned to look through rather than at. With shaking arms, Kalen lifted the crown high and placed it on her head. The metal glowed. Warm. Gold. Divine. And Seraphine Caelora's perfect face twisted into something cold and murderous. If you're already hooked and need to know why a child would dare defy 8 centuries of tradition, and why a sacred crown would choose a wolfless nobody over a perfectly groomed Luna candidate, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what happens next will shatter everything you thought you knew about destiny, bloodlines, and the kind of strength that can't be taught in any training hall. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Trust me, you're going to need your community for this emotional journey. Now let me take you back. 6 months before that impossible moment. Back to when everything seemed perfectly planned. Back to when Alpha Thorian Valecross believed he'd finally found the Luna his broken pack deserved. Thorian Valecross was not a young alpha. At 38, he had dragged the Ironwood pack through wars that still woke him screaming in the night, through famine that had forced him to make choices no wolf should ever face, through territorial disputes that had left scars across his shoulders and permanent shadows behind his eyes. He was respected, feared, admired from a careful distance. But he was alone. His true mate, his Alindra, his moonlight, his reason for breathing, had died 4 years ago delivering their son. She'd lived just long enough to place Kalen in Thorian's trembling arms, to whisper the name she'd chosen, to make him promise 3 things. Love again. Give their son a mother. Give the pack a Luna. For 4 years, Thorian had honored the first promise. He loved Kalen with a fierce, protective devotion that sometimes terrified him, the kind of love that made him check his son's breathing 3 times each night, that made him memorize every laugh and every nightmare. But the second and third promises, those had remained unfulfilled. How could he choose another Luna when every woman he met was measured against a ghost he couldn't stop loving? How could he crown someone else when Alindra's face still smiled at him from every corner of their chambers? Then Seraphine Caelora walked into Ironwood territory like she owned the very ground beneath her feet. Beautiful didn't begin to cover it. Seraphine was the kind of woman who looked carved from moonlight and ambition. Silver fire hair that caught light like precious metal. Posture so perfect it could shame royalty. Eyes sharp as winter ice and twice as calculating. She moved like power personified. Spoke like she'd been born giving commands. She was the daughter of the Northern Ridge Pack's High Council, educated in the finest academies across 3 territories, trained in diplomacy, combat strategy, and pack politics since she could walk. When she entered a room, conversations stopped. When she offered an opinion, wolves listened. She looked exactly like what a Luna should be. Thorian's council had practically thrown a celebration when he'd announced his intention to court her. She's perfect, his beta, Garrett Stormclaw, had said, gripping Thorian's shoulder with genuine relief. Noble bloodline, tactical mind, political connections that'll strengthen every alliance we have. The pack will thrive under her leadership, brother. The elders approve, his head councilwoman had added, her ancient eyes gleaming with rare satisfaction. She carries herself with the dignity Ironwood needs. She'll restore what we lost when Alindra, the woman had caught herself, cleared her throat. She'll be a worthy Luna. Even the warriors respected her. Seraphine had joined their training sessions, demonstrating knife work that made seasoned soldiers nod in appreciation. She'd reviewed defense strategies and offered improvements that actually worked. On paper, on every measurable level, Seraphine was everything Thorian's pack needed. She wasn't his true mate. That sacred gift had been given and ripped away by the moon goddess already. But she was a logical choice. A strategic choice. The right choice. So why did Thorian's wolf snarl every time Seraphine smiled at him? He dismissed it as grief. As the guilt of moving forward when half his soul still lived in the past with Elindra. He told himself that what he felt for Seraphine wasn't love. Not yet, but it could grow into something solid. Something real. Partnership could be enough. Respect could be enough. He'd been catastrophically wrong. But he hadn't known that 6 months ago when he'd announced the Luna coronation to the gathered packs. He hadn't known it when Seraphine had smiled at him with those perfectly painted lips and thanked him for finally recognizing what we could build together. He hadn't known it when he'd retrieved the ancient golden crown from the sacred vault, the same crown that had adorned every Ironwood Luna for 8 generations. 6 months ago, there was only one person who seemed violently opposed to the match. One person whose opinion Thorian had dismissed as the irrational fear of a traumatized child who didn't understand adult complications. Kalen had despised Seraphine from the first moment she'd crossed their threshold. When she'd arrived for that initial formal dinner, 4-year-old Kalen had taken one look at her perfect smile and hidden behind Thorian's legs, trembling. When she'd knelt gracefully to introduce herself, offering a hand for him to shake, Kalen had burst into tears and run from the room. When she'd attempted to read him bedtime stories, a gesture Thorian had appreciated as thoughtful, Kalen had screamed until his voice went hoarse and thrown every book within reach at the walls. "I'm so sorry," Thorian had apologized again and again, exhaustion making his voice rough. He's still adjusting, still grieving in his own way. He's too young to understand that I need to move forward, that the pack needs. "I understand completely," Seraphine had interrupted, her smile never wavering, perfectly gracious. "Children are difficult, especially traumatized ones. He'll come around in time. They always do." She'd been patient for exactly 3 weeks. After that, Thorian began noticing small things he'd been too distracted to see clearly before. The way Seraphine's smile turned brittle when Kalen entered a room. The way she'd suggest, always so reasonably, that perhaps Kalen would benefit from spending more time with the pack nannies, that Thorian coddled the boy too much, that a future alpha needed to learn independence. The way she'd flinch, just slightly, when Kalen accidentally knocked over a cup during one of her strategic planning sessions with the council. "He needs structure," she'd said one evening over dinner. Her voice perfectly modulated, perfectly controlled. "You're too soft with him, Thorian. I say that with respect, but it's true. Kalen will never grow strong if you keep sheltering him from discipline." Thorian had bristled. "He's 4 years old. He lost his mother. He needs compassion, not. He needs a firm hand," Seraphine had countered smoothly, reaching across the table to touch Thorian's wrist. "Which is exactly what I'll provide. As his Luna. As his new mother." Something in Thorian's chest had gone cold at those words. But he'd pushed the feeling away. He'd been wrong to do so. 6 months before the coronation, Thorian Valecross woke at dawn the same way he had every morning for the past 4 years, reaching across cold sheets for a woman who would never be there again. His hand found nothing but emptiness. Always emptiness. He lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling of his chambers, listening to the distant sounds of ironwood waking around him. Wolves heading to morning patrol. Kitchen staff clanging pots in the lower halls. The rhythmic thud of warriors beginning combat drills in the eastern courtyard. His pack. His responsibility. His reason for dragging himself out of bed when every bone in his body wanted to stay buried in darkness. Elindra would have hated seeing him like this. She would have grabbed his face with both hands, kissed him fiercely, and told him to stop wallowing. She would have reminded him that their son needed a father who lived in the present, not a ghost who haunted the past. She would have been right. She was always right. Thorian forced himself upright, swinging his legs over the side of the massive bed that felt far too large for one person. His reflection stared back at him from the mirror across the room, a man who looked older than 38. Silver streaked his dark hair earlier than genetics demanded. Scars crisscrossed his bare shoulders and chest, pale lines against tanned skin. Souvenirs from battles he'd won but never truly left behind. His eyes were the worst part. They used to carry fire, purpose, the kind of intensity that made enemies back down and allies stand straighter. Now they just looked tired. "Papa!" The small voice from the doorway made Thorian's expression shift instantly. He turned, and his entire face softened as Kalen padded into the room, clutching the wooden wolf figurine he took everywhere. The boy's dark curls stuck up at odd angles. His pajamas twisted from restless sleep. "Morning, little wolf," Thorian said gently, opening his arms. Kalen ran to him, burrowing against his chest with the easy trust only children possessed. Thorian held his son close, breathing in the scent of innocence and childhood, milk and pine sap and something uniquely Kalen. This was what kept him functional. This small heartbeat against his ribs. This child who had his mother's eyes and his father's stubborn chin. "Bad dream?" Thorian asked quietly. Kalen nodded against his chest. The cold lady was there again. Thorian's jaw tightened. The cold lady. That's what Kalen had started calling Seraphine 2 weeks ago, refusing to use her name no matter how many times Thorian gently corrected him. "She's not cold, Kalen. It's just formal. That's how nobles are trained to behave." "She has ice eyes," Kalen whispered. "Like winter that doesn't end." Before Thorian could respond, a sharp knock interrupted them. "Enter," Thorian called, his voice shifting from father-soft to alpha-firm in a heartbeat. Garrett Stormclaw, his beta and oldest friend, stepped inside. The man was built like a battle axe, broad, solid, reliable. His expression was carefully neutral, which meant he was about to say something Thorian wouldn't like. "Morning, Alpha." "Kalen." Garrett nodded to the boy, who pressed harder against Thorian's chest. "Council meeting in an hour." "There." Insistent. "Let me guess," Thorian said dryly, running a hand through his son's curls. "They want to discuss the Luna situation again." "They want to discuss finalizing the Luna situation," Garrett corrected carefully. "Lady Seraphine has been in residence for 3 weeks. The council believes it's time to set a coronation date. The alliance packs are getting impatient. Northern Ridge especially." Thorian closed his eyes briefly. Course they were. Seraphine's father sat on Northern Ridge's High Council. This match wasn't just about Thorian finding a partner. It was about securing political stability across 3 territories. About strengthening trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. About showing Ironwood's enemies that the pack wasn't weak just because their alpha had lost his mate. It was about duty. Always duty. "Tell them I'll be there," Thorian said quietly. Garrett hesitated. "Thorian. As your friend, not your beta. Are you certain about this? About her. Does it matter?" Thorian's voice came out more bitter than he intended. "The pack needs a Luna. Kalen needs a mother figure. And I need." He stopped himself, glancing down at his son's wide, listening eyes. "I need to do what's right for Ironwood." "That's not an answer," Garrett said softly. "It's the only answer I have." Garrett studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly and left. Kalen looked up at his father with 2 old eyes. "I don't want the cold lady to be my mama." Thorian's heart cracked a little more. "I know, little wolf. But sometimes we have to do things that are hard. For the good of the pack. You'll understand when you're older." Kalen's bottom lip trembled. Mama wouldn't like her. And there it was. The truth Thorian couldn't escape. Elindra wouldn't have liked Seraphine. His true mate had been warm where Seraphine was polished. Genuine where Seraphine was calculated. Elindra had laughed freely, cried openly, loved fiercely. She'd been real in a way that made everyone around her feel more alive. Seraphine was perfect, perfectly controlled, perfectly trained, perfectly wrong. But perfect was what the pack needed right now. Not messy emotion, not passionate instability. Cold, strategic perfection that would keep Ironwood strong. "Get dressed, Kalen," Thorian said, setting his son gently on his feet. "Breakfast in 20 minutes. The boy trudged toward the door, then paused. "Papa, can I eat with the kitchen wolves again? Please." Thorian frowned. "You mean the Omegas? Kalen, you're the Alpha's heir. You should eat in the main hall with." "They're nicer," Kalen said simply. "They don't make me sit still and quiet. And Lunara fixed my wolf." He held up the wooden figurine, whose chipped ear had been carefully glued back on. "Lunara." Thorian didn't recognize the name. "She cleans the floors. She's my friend." Something uncomfortable twisted in Thorian's gut. He should probably discourage this. The heir to Ironwood shouldn't be forming attachments to low-ranking Omegas. It sent the wrong message about pack hierarchy. The council would have opinions. But Kalen looked happier talking about this Lunara than he had in weeks. "Fine," Thorian heard himself say. "But don't bother her while she's working." Kalen's face lit up like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "Thank you, Papa." He ran from the room, wooden wolf clutched tight. Thorian watched him go, that uncomfortable feeling growing stronger. The council chamber. "She's perfect for this role, Alpha. Surely you can see that." Councilwoman Meredith Ashford leaned forward across the heavy oak table. Her elderly face creased with lines of authority earned over 6 decades of pack service. Around her, the other 5 council members nodded in agreement. Thorian sat at the head of the table, fingers steepled, expression carefully blank as they listed Seraphine's qualifications for the 100th time. Noble bloodline stretching back 12 generations, Councilman Victor Greymane ticked off on his fingers. Diplomatic training that rivals any wolf in the Northern Territories. Tactical mind sharp enough to advise on defense strategies. Political connections that will strengthen every alliance we have. And, he paused meaningfully, she's willing, eager even. Most high-born females wouldn't consider a widowed alpha with a young child. She sees it as an honor, Meredith added. Ironwood has prestige, history, power. Seraphine understands what it means to be Luna of this pack. Does she understand what it means to be a mother? Thorian asked quietly. The council exchanged glances. She'll learn, Garrett said from his position at Thorian's right hand. Many Lunas grow into the maternal role. It's not uncommon. Kalen is terrified of her. Kalen is 4 years old and traumatized, Meredith said, not unkindly. He's terrified of change. Of anyone who isn't you or his mother's ghost. That doesn't mean Seraphine is wrong for this position. It means the boy needs time to adjust. How much time? Thorian challenged. She's been here 3 weeks and he still hides when she enters a room. Children are resilient, Victor said dismissively. He'll adapt. Especially once he sees how much stronger the pack becomes with a proper Luna. You're letting your emotions cloud your judgment, Alpha. This isn't about what makes Kalen comfortable. It's about what Ironwood needs. The words hit harder than Thorian expected. 'Cause they were right. Being Alpha meant making decisions for the greater good, even when those decisions carved pieces out of your soul. Even when they made your son cry. Northern Ridge is watching, Meredith pressed. If we don't formalize this match soon, they'll interpret it as weakness. As Ironwood being unable to commit. We can't afford that perception. Not with the territorial disputes brewing in the western borders. Thorian's jaw tightened. The western borders. Another problem that required a Luna's touch. Diplomatic finesse he didn't possess. Seraphine did. When would you suggest? He asked, the words tasting like ash. 6 months, Garrett said immediately. Gives Kalen more time to adjust. Gives you time to... prepare. And it's politically appropriate. Shows we're serious without appearing desperate. 6 months. Half a year to teach his heart to accept what his head already knew was inevitable. Fine. Thorian stood abruptly. 6 months. Spread the word to the allied packs. The Luna coronation will take place on the autumn equinox. The council erupted in pleased murmurs. Meredith actually smiled. Thorian walked out before they could see his hands shaking. That evening, Seraphine Caelora swept into Thorian's private study without knocking, a liberty she'd started taking in the past week. She wore a gown the color of fresh snow, her silver hair braided in an intricate crown that probably took her handmaid an hour to perfect. She looked like a Luna already. "I heard the wonderful news," she said, her voice smooth as silk. 6 months. The council chose well. They chose, Thorian agreed, not looking up from the border reports spread across his desk. I agreed. Is there a difference? Seraphine moved closer, trailing perfectly manicured fingers along the edge of his desk. You're doing what's right for your pack, Thorian. That takes strength. I respect that. He finally met her eyes. It's green. Beautiful. Cold. Kalen's words echoed, like winter that doesn't end. Tell me honestly, Thorian said quietly. Do you want this position because you care about Ironwood? Or because you care about the power it represents? Seraphine didn't even flinch. Both. I'd be a fool to claim otherwise. But the two aren't mutually exclusive. I will serve this pack with everything I have. I will strengthen your alliances, sharpen your strategies, and present Ironwood as the formidable force it deserves to be recognized as. Isn't that what you need? What about Kalen? Her expression flickered, just for a heartbeat, before smoothing back to perfection. What about him? He needs a mother, not a political strategist. He needs both, Seraphine countered. And I will provide both. Children require structure, Thorian. Discipline. You've been so focused on comforting his grief that you've neglected to prepare him for leadership. That changes when I'm Luna. Something in Thorian's wolf snarled a warning. He ignored it. 6 months, he said instead. Use that time to build a relationship with him. Real trust. Not forced politeness. Of course. Seraphine smiled, and it didn't reach her eyes. I'm sure once he realizes I'm not going anywhere, he'll settle. Children always do. She left in a whisper of expensive fabric and calculated confidence. Thorian sat in the silence she left behind, staring at nothing. Somewhere in the pack house, Kalen was probably having dinner with the kitchen Omegas, laughing, feeling safe. With wolves Seraphine would undoubtedly view as beneath notice. The uncomfortable feeling in Thorian's gut grew teeth. Late that night, Seraphine stood in the shadows of the upper gallery, watching the kitchen entrance 3 floors below. She'd followed a hunch. And there he was, the brat who refused to accept her authority. Kalen slipped out of the kitchen door, wooden wolf tucked under his arm, a genuine smile on his face for the first time since Seraphine had arrived. A moment later, a young woman emerged to wave goodbye. Unremarkable. Dark hair pulled back in a messy braid. Wearing the plain gray dress of the lowest-ranking Omegas. Wolfless, if Seraphine's nose was correct. She couldn't even catch a proper scent from this distance. This was Lunara, the floor scrubber Kalen kept mentioning. The nice one. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. The child was forming attachments to the wrong people. Building loyalty to servants instead of to his future Luna. That was unacceptable. But it was also useful. A slow smile curved Seraphine's perfect lips as a plan began forming. If she couldn't win Kalen's affection, she'd simply remove the competition. Starting with the insignificant Omega who'd somehow captured the heir's misplaced devotion. After all, who would miss a wolfless nobody? Seraphine turned and glided back toward her chambers, already calculating her next move. She didn't notice Kalen watching her from the kitchen doorway, his small face pale with understanding beyond his years. He didn't know what the cold lady was planning. But he knew, with the bone-deep certainty only children possessed, that Lunara was in danger. 5 months before the coronation. Lunara Myles woke before dawn because the Wolfless always woke before dawn. It was an unwritten rule, beaten into her understanding through 20 years of existence at the bottom of Ironwood's hierarchy. Be awake before the wolves stirred. Finish your work before they noticed you were there. Disappear before they remembered you existed. Invisibility was survival. She dressed in the dark of the servants' quarters, a cramped room she shared with 3 other low-ranking Omegas, all of whom at least had their wolves. They got the bunks near the window. Lunara got the thin mattress on the floor by the door, where cold drafts crept in through winter and summer heat turned the space into an oven. She never complained. Complaining required being seen. Her uniform was the same as always. A gray dress so faded it was almost colorless, heavy canvas that wouldn't show stains from scrub water and ash. Her dark hair she pulled back in a practical braid, no ribbons or adornments. Her face she didn't bother checking in a mirror. What was the point? No one looked at her anyway. Lunara slipped out of the quarters and down the back stairs toward the lower kitchens, her footsteps silent through practice. She knew which floorboards creaked, which hallways the patrol routes avoided, which shadows were deepest. 20 years of being invisible taught you the architecture of overlooked spaces. The kitchen was already bustling when she arrived. Head cook Marta, a sturdy woman with flour permanently dusted in her hair, barely glanced up from kneading dough. Lunara. Main hall floors need scrubbing before breakfast service. Council tracked mud through yesterday and nobody cleaned it properly. Then the guest wing needs fresh linens. Lady Seraphine requested a complete change. Again. Yes, ma'am. Lunara's voice came out soft, trained to carry just far enough to confirm she'd heard but not far enough to intrude on actual conversation. And check the laundry annex after. The new girl shrunk 3 of the alpha shirts yesterday. We need them re-washed correctly before he notices. Yes, ma'am. Marta waved her off, already shouting at someone about uneven bread loaves. Lunara collected her supplies from the storage closet. Bucket, brush, rags, lye soap that made her hands crack and bleed if she wasn't careful. Then she made her way to the main hall, keeping her eyes down, her presence small. She passed warriors heading to morning drills. Young wolves laughing about last night's hunt. A visiting dignitary from Ridge Valley discussing trade agreements with one of the council members. Not one of them looked at her. She was furniture. Shadow. A useful object that scrubbed floors and carried water and existed only in the periphery of pack life. Lunara knew this. Accepted this. Had learned early that fighting invisibility only brought pain. The memory. She'd been 7 years old the first time she understood what being wolfless meant. The other pups had shifted for the first time that spring, squealing with delight as fur sprouted and bones reshaped, and suddenly the world smelled sharper, sounded clearer, felt more real. They'd run through the forests in clumsy puppy forms, their parents watching with pride and joy. Lunara had waited, and waited, and waited. Nothing happened. Maybe she's a late bloomer, her caretaker at the time had said nervously. Some wolves don't shift until 8 or 9. But 8 came and went, then 9, then 10. By 11 the whispers started. By 12 she was moved to the servants' quarters. By 13, she understood that she would spend her entire life cleaning up after wolves who would never see her as one of them. Because she wasn't one of them. She was broken. Wrong. A genetic mistake that Ironwood tolerated only because even the lowest Omega served a purpose. Lunara had cried herself to sleep for months after that realization. Then she'd stopped crying, stopped hoping, stopped wishing for a different life. She'd learned to find joy in smaller things instead. Present day. The main hall took 2 hours to scrub properly. Lunara worked on her hands and knees, methodical and thorough, erasing every trace of yesterday's mud until the stone floors gleamed. No one thanked her. She didn't expect them to. By mid-morning she'd moved to the guest wing, stripping Lady Seraphine's bed of silk sheets that probably cost more than Lunara would earn in 5 years. The room smelled of expensive perfume and cold ambition, scents Lunara had learned to identify even without a wolf's nose. She worked quickly, efficiently, careful not to touch anything she didn't have to. Ladies like Seraphine noticed when their possessions were disturbed. The laundry annex was her last task before the afternoon meal service. She found the ruined shirts, expensive fabric shrunk to child size by water that was too hot, and set about fixing what could be fixed. This was where Lunara found her small joys. Mending things. Making broken items whole again. She'd taught herself to sew by watching the pack's seamstress through a cracked door. Had learned to darn socks and patch tears and sometimes, when she was very lucky, to embroider tiny flowers along the edges of children's blankets. The wolfless pups loved those flowers. It made them feel seen. Lunara understood that hunger intimately. She was just finishing the last shirt when she heard it. A small, choked sound from somewhere outside the annex. Crying. She hesitated. Her training screamed at her to ignore it. To stay invisible. To mind her own business and avoid trouble. But the sound was so small. So heartbroken. So young. Lunara set down her needle and slipped outside. Behind the kitchens. She found him tucked behind the storage barrels, knees pulled to his chest, face buried in his arms. Dark curls fell across his forehead. His small shoulders shook with silent sobs. Kalen Valecross. The Alpha's heir. Every instinct Lunara possessed told her to back away slowly. Do not engage. Do not be seen. Especially not by the future Alpha of Ironwood. But he was 4 years old and crying alone, and something in Lunara's chest cracked open. Are you hurt? She asked softly, kneeling a careful distance away. Kalen's head jerked up. His eyes, dark and wet and far too old, fixed on her face. He clutched a wooden wolf figurine so tightly his knuckles were white. Who are you? He whispered. Lunara. I work in the kitchens. Well, everywhere really. Floors mostly. She was rambling. She never rambled. Are you hurt? She asked again. Kalen shook his head, but his bottom lip trembled. My wolf broke. The ear came off. He held up the figurine. Sure enough, one carved ear dangled by a splinter. I can fix that, Lunara heard herself say. Really? Really? Fix things. It's kind of what I do. She pulled a small sewing kit from her apron pocket. She always carried one, never knew when it would be needed, and extracted her tiniest needle and some strong thread. Within minutes, she'd secured the ear back in place, wrapping the thread so carefully it was almost invisible. There. She handed it back. Good as new. Better even. Now he's a warrior wolf with battle scars. Kalen stared at the repaired toy, then at her face. You're nice. The simple statement hit harder than it should have. Thank you, Lunara said quietly. The cold lady isn't nice. Lunara blinked. Cold lady. Seraphine. Kalen's voice dropped to barely a whisper, like saying the name might summon her. She wants to be my new mama. But she's not nice like you. She has ice eyes and she wants to send me away. Something cold slithered down Lunara's spine. I'm sure that's not true. Your papa wouldn't let anyone send you away. Papa doesn't hear me anymore, Kalen said, and the brokenness in those words made Lunara's heart physically hurt. He's too busy being alpha, and the cold lady talks to him in his head and he believes her instead of me. Kalen, can you be my friend? The question came out desperate. Please. I don't have friends. Just the wood wolf. But now I have you too. Every rational part of Lunara's brain screamed warnings. This was dangerous. This crossed every social boundary that kept her safe. An omega, worse, a wolfless omega, did not form attachments with the alpha's heir, did not interfere in pack politics, did not make herself visible. But she looked at his small, hopeful face and heard herself say, Yes, I'll be your friend. Kalen's entire expression transformed. Really? Really? Can I call you Moon Friend? Like in the old stories? Lunara's throat tightened. The old stories about wolves and the moon were sacred. They weren't meant for broken girls with no wolf to call. But they were Kalen's favorite stories. She'd heard him reciting them to himself in the hallways when he thought no one was listening. "You can call me Moon Friend," she whispered. Kalen launched himself at her, wrapping small arms around her neck in a fierce hug. Lunara froze, shocked, terrified, and somehow warm for the first time in years. She hugged him back carefully like he was made of glass. "I have to go," she finally said, pulling back gently. "People will notice if I'm gone too long. Can I visit you? In the kitchens?" Yes, but quietly. And only when it's safe." Kalen nodded solemnly, like she'd just shared a critical secret. "I'm good at quiet." He slipped away, wooden wolf clutched tight, leaving Lunara kneeling in the dirt behind the storage barrels. What had she just done? The following weeks, Kalen kept his word. He visited the kitchens every few days, always when foot traffic was low, always with an excuse, returning a bowl, asking about dinner, checking if anyone had seen his toy. Lunara learned to watch for him, learned the times he was most likely to slip away from his minders, learned to have a quiet corner ready where they could talk without being noticed. He told her everything. His fears about Seraphine, his memories of his mother, his worries that his father was disappearing into duty and grief. She listened, fixed broken toys, smuggled him extra desserts, let him be a child instead of an heir. And something miraculous happened. Kalen started smiling again. His nightmares decreased. His appetite returned. He participated in lessons with more focus and played with other pups more freely. Thorian noticed. Lunara caught him watching his son one afternoon, confusion and relief warring on his scarred face. Like he couldn't understand what had changed but was grateful for it anyway. She made sure he never saw her nearby. Invisibility kept her safe. Invisibility kept Kalen safe. As long as no one noticed their friendship, it could continue. The warning. It was a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks after their first meeting, when Lunara's luck shifted. She was carrying fresh linens to the guest wing, Seraphine's quarters again, when she heard voices through a partially open door. "I don't care what it takes." Seraphine's voice, sharp and cold. "The boy is becoming a problem. His attachment to the servants is embarrassing. It reflects poorly on Thorian's leadership and on my ability to control the household." Lunara froze, hidden by the hallway's shadows. "And what do you propose?" Male voice, unfamiliar, vaguely threatening. "We remove the distractions, starting with the most problematic one. I've been watching. There's a wolfless omega he's grown attached to. Lunara something. Nobody important." Lunara's blood turned to ice. "You want her gone. I want her removed. Permanently. Make it look like an accident. Wolves die in the territories all the time. Even worthless ones." The male voice chuckled. "Consider it done." Footsteps approached the door. Lunara ran. She made it back to the servants' quarters, heart hammering, mind racing. She should tell someone. Should warn who? Who would believe a wolfless omega over the future Luna? Who would even listen? That night, she lay on her thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, understanding with perfect clarity that she'd made herself visible. And visibility, for someone like her, meant danger. 4 months before the coronation. Lunara couldn't stop shaking. 3 days had passed since she'd overheard Seraphine's conversation. 3 days of jumping at shadows, flinching at footsteps, waiting for the accident that would remove her permanently. But nothing happened. Maybe they'd forgotten. Maybe the male voice, whoever he was, had been bluffing. Maybe Seraphine had changed her mind. Lunara desperately wanted to believe any of those things. He didn't. She scrubbed the guest wing floors with mechanical precision, ears straining for any sound that might signal danger. Her hands were raw from gripping the brush too tightly. Her shoulders ached from constant tension. "You look tired." Lunara's heart stopped. She jerked around so fast she nearly knocked over her bucket. Kalen stood in the hallway, wooden wolf tucked under his arm, concern written across his small face. "I'm fine," Lunara said quickly, forcing her voice steady. "Just a long day. You shouldn't be here, Kalen. If someone sees Papa's in a council meeting. They always last forever." He moved closer, dropping to a crouch beside her bucket. "You're scared, can tell. Your hands are shaky like mine get when I have bad dreams." Lunara's throat tightened. 4 years old and he already read people better than most adults. "I'm all right," she lied. "Really? Is it because of the cold lady?" Lunara's hands stilled on the scrub brush. Kalen's eyes, too knowing, too aware, studied her face. "She doesn't like you. I heard her talking to the kitchen boss yesterday. She said you were overstepping your position and needed to be reminded of your place." Ice flooded Lunara's veins. "Kalen, you can't. I won't let her hurt you," he said with the fierce certainty only children possessed. "You're my moon friend. Friends protect each other. Kalen, I'm nobody. You're the Alpha's heir. You can't. You're not nobody." His voice cracked. "You're the only person who listens to me. Who doesn't tell me to be quiet or stand straighter or stop crying. You're—" He stopped, bottom lip trembling. "You're important." Lunara pulled him into a hug before she could stop herself. "You're important too," she whispered fiercely. "So important. Which is why you need to be careful. If Seraphine sees us together." "I don't care." "I do." Lunara pulled back, gripping his small shoulders. "I care very much. So promise me. Promise you'll be careful. Stay away from me when others are watching. Pretend you don't know me if you have to. Can you do that?" Kalen's jaw set in a stubborn line that probably came from his father. "Only if you promise not to disappear." "I won't disappear," Lunara said, praying it wasn't a lie. "Promise. Promise." A door opened somewhere down the hall. Council meeting ending early. "Go," Lunara hissed, shooing him away. "Quickly." Kalen ran, disappearing around the corner just as voices echoed closer. Lunara turned back to her bucket, heart hammering, and scrubbed like her life depended on it. Maybe it did. 2 weeks later. The overheard conversation happened by accident. Lunara was changing linens in one of the guest suites when she heard voices in the adjacent sitting room, Seraphine's suite. The connecting door was cracked open just enough for sound to carry. She should have left immediately. She should have finished her task and disappeared like she always did. But Seraphine's voice carried a sharp edge that froze Lunara in place. "Don't understand why we're waiting 6 months, a male voice said. "Cultured. Arrogant. You have him exactly where you want him. Grieving, desperate, politically cornered. Strike the iron while it's hot, sister." Sister. So this was Seraphine's brother. Lunara had heard rumors about Seraphine Caelora. Ambitious, ruthless, and currently positioned to take over Northern Ridge's High Council if certain rivals mysteriously disappeared. "Patience, Caspian." Seraphine's voice dripped with condescension. "The coronation is strategic. It gives the allied packs time to commit resources to the celebration. By the time I'm crowned Luna, Ironwood will owe favors to half the northern territories. Favors I'll collect. And the boy, Kalen." Seraphine laughed, cold and sharp. "He'll be sent to the Silver Peak training fortress within the year. Thorian will resist at first, but I'll convince him it's for the child's own good. Build character. Forge strength. All the things fathers want to hear. Silver Peak is brutal. Half the pups don't survive the first winter." "Exactly." No emotion in Seraphine's voice. None at all. "If he dies during training, it's tragic but expected. If he survives, he'll be molded into something useful. Either way, he'll be out of my way and I'll have full access to Thorian's authority." Lunara's hands clenched white-knuckled in the sheets. "And after your Luna," Caspian pressed. "What's the larger play?" "The larger play is consolidation. Ironwood is the strongest pack in the Northern Territories, but they're soft. They waste resources on weaklings and defectives. That changes under my leadership. Define defective. The Wolfless, for one. They're parasites. They consume resources without contributing anything meaningful to pack strength. Within 2 years, I'll have proposed legislation to expel them entirely from Ironwood lands. Let them fend for themselves in the wilds. The strong survive. The weak perish. That's nature. Caspian chuckled. Father will love that. Northern Ridge has wanted to implement similar policies for years, but couldn't without Allied support. If Ironwood leads the way, the other packs will follow, Seraphine finished smoothly. And suddenly we're not just Luna of Ironwood. We're shaping policy across 3 territories. Real power, brother. Not the decorative kind. What about Thorian? He's not stupid. He'll notice you consolidating control. Thorian is grieving and broken. By the time he notices anything, it'll be too late. I'll have the Council's loyalty, the Allied pack support, and legal authority as Luna. He'll be Alpha in name only. Besides, accidents happen. Even to Alphas. The casual way she said it, like discussing the weather, made Lunara's stomach turn. You're terrifying, Caspian said, sounding impressed. I'm effective. Now leave. I have a dress fitting in an hour, and I need you gone before Thorian finishes his border patrol. Footsteps approached the connecting door. Lunara ran. She made it to the servants' stairs, pressed herself into the shadows, and tried desperately not to vomit. Send Kalen to a fortress that might kill him. Expel the Wolfless. Take control of Ironwood. Maybe kill Thorian. And Lunara couldn't warn anyone. Who would believe a Wolfless Omega? Who would take her word over the future Lunas? She had no proof. No witnesses. Nothing but overheard conversation that she shouldn't have been close enough to hear in the first place. If she tried to speak up, she'd be punished for eavesdropping. Spelled. Killed. And Kalen would still be in danger. Lunara slid down the wall, wrapped her arms around her knees, and felt utterly, completely powerless. 1 month later. Despite everything, Kalen kept finding her. He was careful, brilliant even for a 4-year-old. He learned the servants' schedules, the patrol routes, the times when hallways were empty. He brought her things. Clumsily picked flowers, smooth stones from the riverbank, a piece of honey cake wrapped in cloth. For you, moon friend, he'd whisper, pressing treasures into her hands. Lunara kept every single one. She hid the flowers in her apron pocket until they wilted. Lined up the stones on the windowsill above her sleeping mat. Shared the honey cake with the younger wolfless pups who never got treats. And she told him stories. Old wolf legends. Tales of brave warriors and clever foxes. Stories her own half-remembered mother had told her before dying when Lunara was barely old enough to remember a face. Kalen soaked them up like desert earth drinking rain. Tell the one about the moon daughter again, he'd beg. So she would. The story of a wolf blessed by the moon herself, who could see truth when others saw only lies. Who protected the innocent even when the powerful called her weak. Moon daughter was brave, Kalen said one afternoon, tucked beside Lunara in the laundry annex while she folded sheets. Very brave. Like you. Lunara's hands stilled. I'm not brave, little wolf. Brave people stand up to danger. I hide from it. Hiding can be brave, Kalen insisted. If you hide to stay alive so you can keep helping people. That's what Moon Daughter did. She hid from the bad king until she was strong enough to stop him. Lunara's heart cracked a little. When did you get so wise? I'm 4.5, Kalen said seriously. That's almost grown up. She laughed despite everything. Almost. Lunara. His voice went small. What happens when the cold lady becomes Luna? Will she make you go away? I don't know, Lunara said honestly. Maybe. I won't let her. Kalen. I'll tell Papa. I'll tell him you're my friend and he has to protect you because that's what alphas do. They protect their pack. I'm not pack, Lunara said gently. I'm wolfless. Remember. You're my pack, Kalen said fiercely. You're the best pack. Before Lunara could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Heavy, measured, authority in every step. Lunara's blood turned to ice. She knew those footsteps. Kalen. Thorian's voice carried through the annex. Kalen, your tutor said you ran off again. Where? He appeared in the doorway and stopped dead. His eyes swept the scene. His son sitting too close to a wolfless Omega. Lunara frozen in the act of folding sheets. Kalen clutching a small flower, clearly meant as another gift. The Alpha's expression went carefully blank. Kalen. Say, now. But Papa. Now. Kalen's bottom lip trembled, but he obeyed. He pressed the flower into Lunara's hand first, quick and defiant, then walked to his father's side. Thorian's gaze locked on Lunara. She immediately dropped her eyes to the floor, heart hammering. You! His voice was alpha hard. Command woven through every syllable. Main hall. 10 minutes. Don't make me come find you. Then he was gone, one large hand on his son's shoulder, leading him away. Lunara sat in the silence, clutching a wilted flower, and knew her time had run out. The main hall. Lunara had never been summoned to the main hall before. She'd cleaned it countless times, scrubbed its floors, polished its windows, dusted its tapestries, but always when it was empty, always when she could be invisible. Now she stood in the center of that massive space, feeling smaller than she'd ever felt in her life. Thorian paced in front of the raised dais where the Alpha's chair sat, a throne in all but name. He looked every inch the battle-scarred warrior, tall, broad-shouldered, radiating barely controlled power. Lunara kept her eyes on the floor. Look at me, Thorian said quietly. She forced herself to raise her head, met his eyes for exactly 1 second before her training screamed at her to look away. How long? He asked. Sir, how long have you been meeting with my son? Lunara's voice cracked. A few weeks, sir. Maybe a month. I never meant. What do you want from him? The question hit like a physical blow. Nothing, sir. Swear. Don't lie to me. Thorian's voice dropped to something dangerous. Wolves higher ranking than you have tried to use Kalen to gain access to me. To secure favors. Political leverage. So I'll ask again, what do you want? Nothing. The word burst out before Lunara could stop it. I don't want anything. He was crying. He was alone and scared and I just wanted to help. Why? Because, Lunara's hands shook. Because nobody else was. Thorian went very still. He's 4 years old, Lunara continued, voice barely above a whisper. And he's terrified. And everyone's so busy preparing him to be alpha that nobody remembers he's still a child. So I listened. That's all. I listened and fixed his toys and told him stories. I didn't ask for anything. I didn't want anything. Her voice broke. I just wanted him to smile again. Thorian stared at her. Really looked at her maybe for the first time. What he saw, Lunara couldn't tell. You're the Omega he's been visiting, Thorian said finally. The one who's been making him happy. It wasn't a question, but Lunara nodded anyway. And you've asked for nothing in return. No favors. No protection. No advancement. I'm wolfless, sir. There's nowhere to advance to. I'm already as low as it gets. Something flickered in Thorian's expression. Not pity. Maybe recognition. My son trusts you, he said slowly. Actually trusts you. I've watched him become braver, calmer, more confident. I thought it was time healing his grief. But it was you. Lunara said nothing. What could she say? Thank you, Thorian said, and the words sounded like they surprised him. Lunara's head jerked up. Sir. For helping him. For seeing him when He stopped, jaw tightening. When I've been too buried in duty to notice he needed something I wasn't providing. You're a good father, Lunara said before she could stop herself. He talks about you constantly. How strong you are. How brave. How much he wants to make you proud. He loves you more than anything. Thorian's expression cracked, just for a moment. Grief and love and guilt all tangled together. He can keep visiting you, he said finally. Quietly. When it's safe. But Lunara. His eyes hardened. If you ever use his trust to hurt him in any way, I will destroy you. Are we clear? Crystal, sir. Good. Dismissed. Lunara fled. 3 months later. Seraphine noticed. Course she noticed. Lunara should have expected it. Should have been more careful. But Kalen kept finding her, and she couldn't bring herself to turn him away, and eventually someone saw them together. Someone who reported directly to the future Luna. The punishment started small. Extra chores. Impossible tasks assigned with insufficient time. Being pulled from regular duties to scrub the ceremonial hall, all 3 floors, by herself in a single afternoon. Lunara completed every task. Then the humiliations began. Seraphine started requesting Lunara specifically for the worst jobs. Cleaning chamber pots. Hauling ash from the main fireplaces. Scrubbing the kennels where the hunting hounds lived. And she always made sure others were watching. Oh, Lunara, Seraphine would say, voice dripping false concern. I'm so sorry, but the previous Omega simply couldn't handle this task properly. And since you're so thorough, I thought you'd be perfect for it. Translation. You're wolfless and worthless. This is your place. Lunara took it all. Kept her head down. Stayed silent. Because speaking up would mean expulsion. And expulsion would mean leaving Kalen alone with a woman who planned to send him to die. So she scrubbed and cleaned and endured. And waited. 1 week before the coronation. Lunara Myles. Head cook Marta's voice cut through the kitchen's morning chaos. Lunara looked up from the vegetables she was chopping. Yes, ma'am. You've been reassigned for coronation day. Lady Seraphine specifically requested you. Dread pooled in Lunara's stomach. Requested me for what? Cleaning the ceremonial courtyard steps. She wants them pristine for the ceremony. You'll start at dawn and work until the event begins at noon. After that, you're to remain nearby in case any cleaning emergencies arise during the celebration. The ceremonial courtyard, where the Luna coronation would take place. Where Seraphine would officially become Luna of Ironwood. Where Lunara would be forced to watch the woman who planned to destroy everything she cared about claim ultimate power. Understood, Lunara whispered. Good. It's an honor, you know. Being chosen for such an important task. An honor. Lunara almost laughed. More like a calculated cruelty. Seraphine placing the wolfless Omega exactly where she'd be forced to witness her own doom. But as Lunara returned to chopping vegetables, a strange thought occurred to her. The ceremonial courtyard placed her at the center of the most important event in Ironwood's political calendar. Visible to everyone. Impossible to ignore. Maybe, just maybe, that could be useful. Maybe invisibility had served its purpose. Maybe it was time to be seen. Coronation Day. Dawn broke cold and merciless over Ironwood. Lunara had been scrubbing the ceremonial courtyard steps for 3 hours. Her hands were raw, her knees bruised from kneeling on unforgiving stone. The ancient marble gleamed like fresh snow under her efforts, every grain of dirt removed, every trace of moss scraped away, every edge polished until it caught the rising sun. Perfect. Just like Seraphine demanded. Around her, the packlands transformed into something from legend. Banners in ironwood silver and black hung from every surface. Garlands of winter roses, impossibly rare, impossibly expensive, draped the courtyard columns. The sacred fire pit at the ceremony center had been prepared with wood from the oldest oak in the territory, ready to burn for the Luna's blessing. Wolves arrived in waves. Allied packs from across the northern territories, their alphas and Lunas dressed in ceremonial finery that probably cost more than Lunara would earn in 10 lifetimes. Northern Ridge, Silver Peak, Stonehaven, Moonshadow. All come to witness Ironwood's new Luna rise to power. All come to witness Seraphine's triumph. Lunara wrung out her scrub brush and tried not to feel sick. "Move aside, Wolfless." A server hurried past carrying a tray of crystal goblets. Another followed with platters of delicacies Lunara couldn't name. The kitchen had been working for days to prepare the coronation feast. Lunara pressed herself against the courtyard wall, making herself small, invisible, her usual armor. But today, invisibility felt different. Today, she was positioned exactly where everyone could see her. A wolfless omega in servant's rags, kneeling at the base of steps that would soon hold the most powerful wolves in 3 territories. Reminder. This is what you are. This is where you belong. Seraphine had placed her here deliberately. A final humiliation before claiming everything. Lunara gripped her brush tighter and kept scrubbing. Mid-morning. The ceremony preparations reached a fever pitch. Musicians tuned instruments that probably cost more than Lunara's life. Dancers in traditional ceremonial garb practiced their formations, the ancient Luna's dance that would open the ritual. Priests from the sacred grove arrived in flowing white robes, carrying the ceremonial implements blessed by the moon herself. And at the center of it all, in a private tent erected specifically for the occasion, Seraphine prepared to become Luna. Lunara caught glimpses of her through the tent's open flap. The future Luna wore a gown that shimmered like starlight, silver silk embroidered with threads that had to be actual platinum. Her dark hair was arranged in an elaborate style that probably required 3 servants and 2 hours. Diamonds glittered at her throat, wrists, and ears. She looked like a goddess. Cold, perfect, untouchable. Lunara. The small voice made Lunara's heart crack. Kalen stood at the courtyard's edge, dressed in formal attire that made him look even smaller. Black and silver to match his father. His hair had been slicked back. His tiny hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. He looked terrified. Lunara abandoned her brush and moved to him quickly, crouching so they were eye level. "Hey, little wolf. You look very handsome. I don't want to be here." His voice trembled. "I don't want her to be Luna. She's not kind like Mama was. He's cold. And when she looks at me, her eyes are empty. Because she sees you as an obstacle," Lunara thought but couldn't say. "Because she's planning to send you away to die." "I know," Lunara whispered instead. "I know it's hard. But you're so brave, Kalen. The bravest wolf I know. Will you stay?" He grabbed her hand. "During the ceremony. Will you stay where I can see you?" "I'll be right here," Lunara promised, squeezing back. "The whole time. I'm not going anywhere. Promise. Promise." "Kalen." A sharp voice cut through the courtyard. One of the formal attendants, glaring. "The Alpha wants you. Now." Kalen's grip tightened desperately. "Go," Lunara said softly. "I'll be right here. Remember." He nodded, released her hand, and walked toward the main pavilion like a prisoner approaching execution. Lunara returned to her steps and scrubbed harder. Noon. The ceremony began with drums. Deep, resonant beats that echoed off the mountains surrounding Ironwood. Ancient rhythms that predated packed territories, predated civilization, predated everything except the wolves themselves and the moon they served. The courtyard filled to capacity. Hundreds of wolves in formal attire, arranged by rank and pack affiliation. The allied alphas sat in positions of honor near the sacred fire. Lesser pack members filled the outer rings. Servants and omegas lined the walls. Lunara knelt at the base of the ceremonial steps, exactly where she'd been ordered, visible to everyone, acknowledged by no one. The drums intensified. Dancers emerged. 12 of them, 6 male and 6 female, bodies painted with sacred symbols. They moved through the Luna's dance, telling the story of the first Luna who'd been blessed by the moon herself. How she'd united the fractured packs. How she'd brought peace to war-torn lands. How she'd ruled with wisdom and strength until the day she'd walked into the forest and become part of the moon's eternal light. The dance ended with the performers kneeling in a circle around the sacred fire. Silence fell. Then the high priestess emerged. She was ancient, nobody knew exactly how old. Her white hair fell to her waist. Her eyes were clouded with cataracts but somehow still saw everything. She wore robes that had been blessed in the sacred grove, woven with silver thread that caught the firelight. In her hands, she carried the Luna crown. Lunara had never seen it up close before. It was beautiful in a wild, untamed way. Not delicate or refined like Seraphine's diamonds. The crown was woven from branches of the sacred oak, interlaced with strands of pure silver. Moonstones were set at intervals along its length, each one glowing with inner light that didn't come from any earthly source. Legend said the crown had been crafted by the first Luna herself, that it carried the moon's blessing, that it would only accept a worthy wearer. Those deemed unworthy would be rejected. The crown would burn them or refuse to sit upon their head or simply fall apart in their hands. Nobody had been rejected in 300 years. The crown had accepted every Luna presented to it for generations. Because by the time a wolf reached the coronation ceremony, they'd already been vetted, tested, and approved by pack councils, allied alphas, and priestesses. The crown's choice was a formality, a symbolic blessing on a decision already made. Lunara watched the high priestess raise the crown above her head. "We gather today," the ancient wolf intoned, her voice carrying across the silent courtyard, "to witness the choosing. The Luna crown, blessed by the moon herself, will accept or reject the candidate presented. If accepted, the candidate will be bound to Ironwood as Luna, protector of the weak, guide to the strong heart of the pack." Thorian emerged from the main pavilion. He looked every inch the alpha, battle-scarred and powerful, radiating authority that made lesser wolves drop their eyes instinctively. But Lunara could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his mouth. He didn't want this either. But duty demanded. Politics required. The pack needed a Luna. Behind Thorian, Seraphine glided forward like a hunting cat, graceful, confident, radiating certainty that the crown would accept her because how could it not? She was perfect, powerful, connected to Northern Ridge's most influential family, politically brilliant, everything a Luna should be. Kalen followed last, a tiny shadow behind his father. His face was pale. His hands shook. Their eyes met across the courtyard, Kalen's and Lunara's. She smiled, tried to send comfort across the distance. His bottom lip trembled. The high priestess began the ritual words. Ancient language that predated common pack speech. Words of binding and blessing and choice. Seraphine knelt before the sacred fire. Thorian stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder. The traditional position. Alpha presenting his chosen Luna to the crown. The high priestess lifted the crown higher. "By moon's light and pack's need, we present Seraphine Caelora of Northern Ridge to..." "No!" The scream shattered the ceremony like breaking glass. Kalen lunged forward. His small body moved faster than anyone expected, ducking under his father's reach, running straight for the high priestess. "Kalen!" Thorian's voice cracked with shock. But Kalen was already there. His tiny hands grabbed the Luna crown from the startled priestess's grip. Gasps rippled through the crowd. This was sacrilege. Violation of the highest order. The crown could only be handled by the high priestess and the Luna candidate. Anyone else. Kalen ran. Straight toward Lunara. "Little wolf, no." Lunara scrambled to her feet, panic flooding her veins. "You can't." He reached her. Looked up with tear-filled eyes that held absolute certainty. "You," he said. "It should be you." And he placed the Luna crown on her head. The world exploded into light. Not metaphorically. Not symbolically. Actual physical light. The moonstones in the crown blazed like captured stars. Silver radiance poured from them, flooding the courtyard with illumination so bright wolves shielded their eyes. The sacred fire roared upward, flames turning from orange to silver white. And Lunara felt it. Power. Ancient and vast and utterly terrifying. Pouring through the crown into her very bones. reshaping something fundamental in her spirit, binding her to ironwood in ways she couldn't begin to understand. The light faded. Silence crashed down like thunder. Every single wolf in the courtyard stared at Lunara. The wolfless Omega in servant's rags, kneeling at the base of the ceremonial steps with a 4-year-old child pressed against her side and the Luna crown blazing on her head. The crown that only accepted the worthy. The crown that had just chosen the lowest-ranking wolf in 3 territories. The high priestess broke the silence first. Her clouded eyes were wide with shock, but her voice rang clear. The crown has chosen. What? Seraphine surged forward, fury twisting her perfect features into something ugly. That's impossible. She's nothing. Wolfless. She has no rank, no power, no. The crown has chosen, the high priestess repeated louder. The moon's blessing cannot be denied, cannot be questioned, cannot be refused. She manipulated this. Seraphine rounded on Lunara, eyes blazing. You conniving little parasite. You used the boy. You've been poisoning his mind against me, making him think. Enough. Thorian's voice cut through Seraphine's tirade like a blade. He moved forward, placing himself between Seraphine and Lunara. Protecting. The crowd's shocked whispers intensified. The crown has chosen, Thorian said, voice carrying to every corner of the courtyard. That is the law. That is our tradition. The moon's will supersedes all else. She's wolfless. Seraphine spat. She can't even shift. How can she possibly protect the pack? Lead ceremonies. Fulfill Luna duties that require. The crown chose her. Thorian's eyes were hard as stone. Question the crown's wisdom, and you question the moon herself. Is that really the position you want to take, Lady Caelora? Seraphine's mouth opened, closed, her hands clenched into fists. She looked at Lunara with pure hatred. Then she turned to the assembled crowd. This is madness. Ironwood has lost its way. Northern Ridge will not support this mockery. Our alliance is severed. She gathered her skirts and swept from the courtyard. Her brother Caspian and the Northern Ridge delegation followed, their expressions ranging from shock to disgust to poorly hidden amusement. Let them go, Lunara thought distantly. Let them leave before they realize I heard their plans. Thorian watched them depart, then turned to face Lunara. Really looked at her. The crown still blazed on her head. Kalen still clung to her side. And Lunara knelt in her servant's rags before the entire pack, feeling more exposed than she'd ever felt in her life. Stand, Thorian said quietly. Lunara stood on shaking legs. Thorian descended the steps until they were level. Alpha and... What? Luna. Impossible. This had to be a mistake. Cosmic joke. I need to ask you something, Thorian said, voice pitched for her ears alone. And you need to answer honestly. Lunara nodded, not trusting her voice. Do you want this? His eyes searched hers. Not the crown. Not the title. Not the power. But the responsibility. The pack. The duty to protect wolves who will hate you for being chosen. The burden of leadership when you have no formal training and half the territory thinks you're worthless. Lunara opened her mouth. Closed it. What did she want? Power. Well, she'd never wanted that. Recognition. Maybe once. But not like this. Safety. The crown made her the most visible target in Ironwood. So what did she want? She looked down at Kalen. At his tear-stained face and desperate hope. I want him safe, Lunara said finally. I want him to grow up loved and protected and free from people who'd hurt him for political gain. I want, her voice strengthened. I want the wolfless to have value. To be seen as pack instead of parasites. I want the weak protected instead of cast aside. I want Ironwood to be the kind of place where kindness matters more than rank. That's not a small ask, Thorian said. I know. It'll mean fighting. Every day. Against tradition, prejudice, wolves who think you stole something that wasn't yours. I know. It'll mean standing beside me as Luna. Bound to me. Bound to this pack. For life. Lunara met his eyes. Saw the question beneath the words. Are you sure? She thought about running. About removing the crown and disappearing into the forest. About choosing the safety of invisibility over this impossible responsibility. Then Kalen squeezed her hand. I choose him, Lunara said clearly. I choose this pack. I choose to try. Something shifted in Thorian's expression. Respect. Maybe relief. He turned to face the assembled wolves. The moon has chosen, he declared, voice carrying across the stunned crowd. Lunara Myles, Wolfless Omega of Ironwood, is our Luna. Luna. Anyone who cannot accept this may leave now. Anyone who stays accepts her authority, her protection, and her place at my side. Silence. Nobody moved. Nobody left. But nobody cheered either. The High Priestess stepped forward. The binding must be completed. Alpha and Luna must speak the vows. Lunara's heart hammered. Now. The crown has chosen. The ceremony must finish. The ancient priestess smiled slightly. Unless you wish to reject the moon's blessing. No, Lunara whispered. No, I accept. Then kneel before your alpha. Lunara knelt. Thorian knelt across from her. The High Priestess placed one hand on each of their heads. By moon's light and sacred fire, by crown's choice and pack's need, I bind Alpha to Luna and Luna to Alpha. Your spirits entwined. Your fates joined. Your strength shared. Do you accept this binding? I accept, Thorian said. Lunara's voice shook. I accept. Light blazed again. Smaller this time but no less powerful. It wrapped around them like silver threads, binding something deep in Lunara's chest to something in Thorian's. She felt it snap into place. Felt him. His strength. His grief. His hope. His absolute determination to protect what was his. And he felt her too. She knew it by the way his eyes widened slightly. The binding faded. Rise, the High Priestess commanded. Luna of Ironwood. Lunara stood. The crown blazed on her head. Kalen beamed at her side. And Thorian offered his hand. She took it. Welcome to Ironwood, Lunara, he said formally. Then quieter just for her. Try not to let them destroy you. Lunara looked out at the sea of shocked, hostile, disbelieving faces. I'll try, she whispered back. And the coronation that was supposed to crown Seraphine ended with a wolfless Omega standing beside the Alpha, wearing a crown that shouldn't have chosen her, binding herself to a life she'd never imagined. The pack didn't cheer. But they didn't rebel either. And in that moment it was enough. 6 months later. The wolfless children gathered in what had once been a storage annex. Now it was a classroom. Lunara watched from the doorway as 15 pups, ranging from 4 to 12 years old, sat in a circle around Master Aldrich, one of Ironwood's most respected teachers. He'd been skeptical when she'd first approached him. A grizzled warrior who'd trained 3 generations of pack fighters, asked to teach children who couldn't shift. But he'd agreed. Grudgingly at first, then with growing respect. Who can tell me, Aldrich asked the assembled children, why we honor the moon? A small hand shot up. Mira, age 6, wolfless like Lunara. Because she guides us even when we can't see her. Good. And what does that teach us about strength? That strength isn't always visible, piped up another child. Sometimes it's quiet. Like Lunara. Lunara's throat tightened. 6 months ago these children had been invisible. Relegated to the worst tasks, given scraps, taught only enough to serve. Now they sat in a classroom with ranked wolves' children, learning history and mathematics and pack law. It had been her first act as Luna. Not her easiest one. You're hovering again. Lunara turned to find Thorian leaning against the corridor wall, arms crossed, the ghost of a smile on his scarred face. I'm observing, she corrected primly. You're worrying they'll suddenly realize you exist and revoke everything you've built. He wasn't wrong. 6 months as Luna, And Lunara still woke up expecting the crown to burn her. Expecting someone to discover the mistake. Expecting the moon to reclaim her blessing from the wolfless Omega, who had no business leading a pack. It never happened. The crown stayed. The binding held. And slowly, glacially, Ironwood began to change. Council meeting in an hour, Thorian reminded her. Elder Bram wants to discuss the new Omega housing proposals. Lunara grimaced. Let me guess. He thinks I'm coddling the weak. He thinks you're revolutionizing 300 years of tradition too quickly. Which you are. Thorian's expression softened. But you're doing it anyway. That takes courage. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing. He pushed off the wall. Come. We'll face Bram together. Like we always do. Together. 6 months, and that word still made Lunara's heart skip. The council chamber. Elder Bram was predictably furious. Separate housing complexes for Omegas. He slammed the proposal document onto the council table. With private rooms. Individual cooking facilities. This isn't a luxury resort, Luna. It's basic dignity, Lunara replied calmly. She'd learned to keep her voice level in council meetings. Emotion made them dismiss her. Facts made them listen. Omegas currently sleep 20 to a room in the servants' quarters. They have no privacy, no personal space, no ability to recover from heat cycles without being subjected to. They're Omegas. They serve the pack. That's their purpose. Their purpose is to support pack function, Lunara corrected. They can't do that effectively if they're exhausted, traumatized, and treated like property. This is exactly what we feared, another elder interjected. Elder Senna, marginally more sympathetic but still traditional. A wolfless Luna sympathizing with weakness. Next you'll want to give them voting rights. Eventually, yes. The council chamber erupted. Thorian let them shout for exactly 30 seconds before his alpha command cut through the chaos. Enough. Instant silence. Lunara's reforms have increased pack productivity by 18%, Thorian stated flatly. Omega retention is up. Complaints are down. Children are better educated across all ranks. The wolfless are contributing skills we didn't know existed because we never bothered to ask. He leaned forward. You don't have to like the changes. But you will acknowledge the results. Elder Bram's jaw worked. And if other packs think we've gone soft, if they see this as weakness, then they're welcome to test Ironwood's strength, Thorian said coldly. And discover how wrong they are. The threat hung in the air. Nobody challenged it. The Omega housing proposal passes, Thorian declared. Construction begins next month. Dismissed. The elders filed out, grumbling but compliant. Lunara waited until they were gone before releasing a shaky breath. I thought Bram was going to have a stroke, she muttered. He'll survive. He always does. Thorian gathered the scattered proposal documents. You handled that well. I didn't do anything. You commanded them into submission. I supported your proposal. You did the hard work. Research, planning, finding funding that doesn't drain pack resources. I just reminded them I'm still alpha. He glanced at her. We're a team, Lunara. Your compassion and my authority. Together, we're changing Ironwood. Together again. Lunara tried to ignore the warmth spreading through her chest. 6 months of working beside Thorian. 6 months of council meetings and pack dinners and late-night planning sessions. 6 months of slowly discovering the man beneath the alpha's mask. He was stubborn, occasionally infuriating, burdened by duty and guilt in equal measure. He was also kind when he thought nobody was watching, patient with Kalen, protective of the weak even when it contradicted pack tradition. And he listened to her, actually listened like her words had value. It was terrifying how much she'd come to care for him. Lunara. She blinked. Sorry. Distracted. Council meetings will do that. He hesitated. Kalen's requesting your presence at bedtime. Something about a story you promised him. The Moon Daughter finale. I've been dragging it out for weeks. He's been talking about it non-stop. Thorian's expression softened in that way it only did when discussing his son. He adores you. You know that, right? The feeling is mutual. I know. Something shifted in Thorian's eyes. Thank you. For loving him. For being what he needs when I didn't know how to be. You're an excellent father, Lunara said firmly. Kalen knows that too. We're excellent together, Thorian corrected quietly. You and I, parents, partners. However you want to define it. Partners, not mates. The moon hadn't granted them that bond. Lunara felt the crown's power, felt the binding that made her Luna, but not the soul-deep connection that true mates shared. Sometimes she wondered if it hurt Thorian. If he resented fate for giving him a chosen Luna instead of a fated mate. She was too afraid to ask. I should go, Lunara said, gathering her own documents. Kalen will riot if I'm late. Lunara. Thorian's hand caught her wrist. Gentle. Warm. You're doing incredible things for this pack. Don't let the elders make you doubt that. She looked up at him. At the scarred face that had seemed so harsh 6 months ago and now just seemed familiar. I'll try, she whispered. His thumb brushed across her wrist, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. Then he released her and stepped back. Go tell my son his story, Thorian said. Before he stages a coup. Lunara fled before her racing heart betrayed her. Kalen's room. And then what happened? Kalen demanded from his nest of blankets. Lunara sat on the edge of his bed, the wooden wolf he'd carved months ago sitting on the nightstand. Moon Daughter stood before the bad king and said, I am wolfless but I am not powerless, Kalen recited. I remember. But what did she do? She showed him that compassion was stronger than cruelty. That protecting the weak made the pack stronger, not weaker. And slowly, the wolves who'd scorned her began to see the truth. Did she become queen? She became something better. She became the wolf who changed everything. Who proved that worth isn't determined by what you're born as, but by what you choose to do. Kalen absorbed this solemnly. Then, like you, Lunara's breath caught. Little wolf. You're Moon Daughter. You came here wolfless and now you're Luna. And you're making Ironwood better. You're protecting the weak and teaching the other wolves to be kind. His eyes shone in the lamplight. You're the story come true. I'm just trying to help. That's what Moon Daughter said too. But she was still brave. Kalen snuggled deeper into his blankets. I'm glad the crown chose you. Glad you're my Luna. My. He hesitated. You're what? Lunara asked softly. Can I call you Mama? The question hit like a physical blow. Lunara's vision blurred. Are you sure? You had a mama. Real one. I could never. I know. Kalen's voice was small but certain. I remember my first mama. She was kind and warm and she sang to me. But she's with the moon now. And you're here. And you love me. Can feel it. So can I. Can you be my new mama? Tears slipped down Lunara's cheeks before she could stop them. Yes, she whispered. Yes, little wolf. I would be honored. Kalen launched himself at her. Small arms wrapped around her neck in a fierce hug that knocked the breath from her lungs. I love you, Mama, he mumbled into her shoulder. I love you too, Kalen. So much. They stayed like that for a long moment. A wolfless Omega and an Alpha's heir. Choosing each other. Family not by blood but by something stronger. Eventually Lunara tucked him back into bed, kissed his forehead, and whispered the traditional goodnight blessing. May the moon watch over you until dawn. And may she guide you home, Kalen finished sleepily. Lunara dimmed the lamp and slipped into the hallway. Thorian stood there, leaning against the wall in the shadows, listening. Their eyes met. He asked you, Thorian said quietly. Yes. And you said yes. How could I not? Lunara wiped at her damp cheeks. He's everything good in this world. Kind and brave and so full of love despite everything he's lost. I'd be honored to be his mother. You already are. Thorian pushed off the wall. He hasn't smiled this much since Elara died. You gave him that. Gave him hope. Oi. Security. We gave him that, Lunara corrected. Together. Together, Thorian agreed. They walked through the quiet hallways in comfortable silence. Eventually they reached the Luna's chambers. Lunara's chambers now, though they still felt too large, too grand for a wolfless Omega. Thorian stopped at her door. Can I ask you something? Lunara blurted before she lost courage. Always. Do you? She twisted her hands together. Do you resent that the moon didn't give us a mate bond? That you're bound to a Luna you didn't choose? That you're stuck with someone who can't? Stop. Thorian's hand cupped her cheek, gentle and warm. Listen to me carefully, Lunara. I don't resent you. I don't feel stuck. And the moon gave us exactly what we needed. But we're not mates. Not really. Just bound by ceremony. We're partners, Thorian said firmly. We're friends. We're raising a child together. We're changing Ironwood together. And every day I choose you. The moon's blessing or not, I choose you. You choose me. Lunara's voice cracked. Every single day. His thumb brushed away a tear. Maybe we don't have the instant soul-deep bond that fated mates get. But we have something I think might be stronger. We have choice. We have trust built slowly over months of working together. We have affection that grew from respect and partnership. Is that enough? Lunara whispered. For an alpha. It's everything, Thorian said. For this alpha. Lunara's heart stuttered. I'm not asking you to love me, Thorian continued quietly. I know 6 months isn't long. I know you're still finding your place here. But Lunara, I care for you. Deeply. And if you ever felt the same, if you ever wanted more than partnership, Lunara kissed him. It was impulsive and terrifying and probably broke 17 protocols. But his lips were warm and his hand was gentle on her cheek, and this scarred, duty-bound alpha had just offered her his heart. She could not accept it. Thorian froze for exactly 1 heartbeat. Then he kissed her back. Slow and tender and full of months of restrained affection finally released. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Lunara saw her own wonder reflected in his eyes. I choose you too, she whispered. Every day. For as long as you'll have me. Forever then. Thorian rested his forehead against hers. If you'll have me for that long. Forever sounds perfect. A soft gasp made them both turn. Kalen stood in his doorway, eyes wide, wooden wolf clutched to his chest. You kissed, he said, awed. Like in the stories. Does that mean, are you? Come here, little wolf, Thorian said, crouching down. Kalen ran to them. Thorian scooped him up, and suddenly all 3 of them were tangled together in the hallway. Alpha, Luna, and Air. Family. Are you gonna be my mama and papa together now? Kalen asked hopefully. Like a real family. We were already a real family, Lunara said. But yes. Together. If that's what you want. I prayed for this, Kalen said solemnly. I asked the moon goddess to give me a mama. And she sent you. You're the best mama the moon could have chosen. Thorian's arms tightened around both of them. Thank you, he whispered to the moon, to fate, to whatever force had placed a crown on a wolfless Omega's head and changed all their lives. Thank you. 3 months later. Lunara stood on the main hall balcony, watching the Packlands transform. The new Omega housing complex was nearly finished. The mixed-rank school had doubled in size. Wolfless pack members now held positions they'd never dreamed possible. Teachers, advisors, healers. Ironwood was changing. Below, Kalen played with a group of children, ranked and wolfless mixed together without thought. Laughing. Free. You did that, Thorian said, joining her at the railing. You changed centuries of tradition in less than a year. We did that, Lunara corrected. I proposed. You supported. Together. Together, Thorian agreed. His hand found hers. Always together. Lunara leaned into his warmth, feeling the crown's gentle weight on her head. The symbol of a blessing she'd never expected. A responsibility she'd never sought. But one she'd chosen to accept. Because worthiness wasn't determined by birth or rank or the ability to shift. It was determined by choice. By compassion. By the willingness to stand up and say, I will try. I will care. I will fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. The moon had chosen a wolfless Omega to lead Ironwood. And Lunara had chosen to be worthy of that choice. What are you thinking? Thorian asked softly. That I'm grateful, Lunara said. For all of this. For you. For Kalen. For the chance to matter. You always mattered. Thorian kissed her temple. The crown just made everyone else see what I already knew. Below, Kalen spotted them and waved enthusiastically. Lunara waved back, heart full to bursting. A wolfless Omega. An alpha bound by duty. A child who needed love more than protocol. Fate had woven them together in the most unlikely way. And somehow, impossibly, it worked. They were family. Chosen. Bound not by destiny but by something stronger. Love. Slowly built, carefully tended, fiercely protected. The moon watched over them all. And in Ironwood, the wolfless were finally seen. End. Epilogue. 5 years later. The crown still blazed on Lunara's head. But now it felt like home. She stood in the council chamber. No longer the nervous Omega afraid of being discovered, but a Luna who'd earned her place through 5 years of tireless work. The Wolfless Rights Act passes unanimously, Elder Bram announced, and actually smiled. Lunara, your proposal is accepted. Full citizenship for Wolfless pack members. Voting rights. Legal protections. It had taken 5 years of fighting, negotiating, and slow cultural shift. But it had happened. Lunara looked at Thorian, who sat beside her in the Alpha's chair. Her partner. Her mate in everything but the moon's explicit blessing, though she'd stopped caring about that years ago. Their chosen bond was stronger than any fated connection. Kalen burst into the chamber, now 9 years old and already showing signs of becoming a formidable alpha. Mama. Mpa. The Southern Ridge delegation is here for the treaty signing. Mama and Papa. The titles still made Lunara's heart warm. We're coming, little wolf, she said. As they walked together through the halls of Ironwood, past wolfless pack members who met her eyes with respect instead of pity, past Omegas who stood tall instead of cowering, past children of every rank playing together without thought of hierarchy, Lunara felt the truth settle in her bones. Destiny hadn't made a mistake. The moon had chosen exactly who Ironwood needed. A wolfless Omega with a heart big enough to change the world. And she had. One choice at a time. Together.